So yesterday, I published a study on clearance sacrifices. So this is where you sacrifice one of your pieces with the purpose of clearing a particular square or line for another piece. This is like the second part of the video that I published earlier on this topic. And this will be great, you guys. Without wasting much of your time, let's look at the first example of a clearance sacrifice. So here is a simple endgame position where white has to make a move in order to win. If you were playing white, what would you play in this position? Let's go. If you said King F3, I'm quite disappointed, and I propose that you watch part 1 of this video series. Any decent player in this position can easily see this move, Rook G8 check. So in this case, you sacrifice your rook to clear the way for your pawn, so that you can promote that into a queen, not a knight, because if you promote into a knight in this position, you're going to lose. So this is the basic example of what a clearance sacrifice is. You just sacrifice anything, could be a pawn, could be a minor piece, a major piece, so that you can create a way for another piece to come through. Anyway, apart from that, there's also what we call a square clearance. It's just not about clearance sacrifices. There are many forms of that, and grandmasters do study these things. While you study openings, tricks, and traps, grandmasters study these things: positional sacrifices, clearance sacrifices, and etc. That's why they are so good. Imagine if you were playing white pieces in this position, what would you play? Let's go. So there are situations like this where it looks like there's no immediate piece to sacrifice, but you would really want your knight to sit on f6, delivering this check, so that at the end of the day you may win black's queen on d5. How would you do that? The f6 square must be empty, and so you need to clear that square so that the knight can sit on it. The move I would play here is queen takes d8. Why? Because after rook takes d8 by black, now I have the possibility to go knight f6 check, double attacking the king and the queen. So on the next move, I'm going to win back the queen and be up a piece. So that's an example of a square clearance. One more example before I show you some practical openings where these kinds of sacrifices can happen. So let's say you are playing white in this position. What would you do? I want you to see this. If not for this knight sitting on g7, you could have easily checkmated black with rook f8, supported by your bishop on h6. That would be checkmate. And so now that we have identified the problem or the obstacle in the line of this checkmate, we have to do something about this to deflect the knight from blocking this possibility. That's why in this position, I would play queen e8 check, because I can see that black's king cannot escape from Sobibo. The only move for black is knight takes e8, after which rook f8 checkmate now becomes a possibility. These are some of the minor differences between you and strong players out there. They are able to see these kinds of moves because they do practice these things. They do study these principles and they take them so seriously, while you only focus on traps and gambits. My God, what is wrong with you? It is time to grow up. Anyway, so with these few ideas, I should mention to say there are two types of clearance sacrifices or clearance tactics, as you like. Number one, where you move one of your pieces out of the way to make room for another piece to enter a square, either occupied or blocked by that piece. Or number two, where you force an enemy piece away that is blocking a file, diagonal or rank, in order to clear the way for an attack along it, like what we did here. So now that you have an idea of what a clearance sacrifice is, let me show you some opening examples where you can play these early clearance tactics in order to open up some lines for your other pieces. Could be in the opening stage as well, but the examples I'm going to show you do not really define what a clearance sacrifice is. We are just using the same concepts in those openings. Let's go. So first opening example, we might make use of these so-called clearance sacrifice very early in the Stafford Gambit, thanks to Eric Rosen, who popularized this opening, because at least many people seem to know this funny gambit. So the idea is you sacrificed your pawn on e5 in order to open up an invisible line to do with queen h in the near future, and also open up the way for your dark squared bishop to sit on c5 someday. Not to mention that sacrificing your pawn on e5 was a way of distracting white's king's knight, which was sitting on f3, so you got rid of that knight indirectly by sacrificing your pawn. So this is another type of clear and sacrifice, though not really the main definition of a clear and sacrifice. So white players here play pawn to d3 to protect their e4 pawn. You can simply go bishop c5, intending to play knight g4 next, teaming up with your bishop. So if they go h3, stopping knight g4, you can just go ahead and take the f2 pawn. After king takes, you go knight takes e4 check. You just got back your pawn like that. Next, you're going to play queen d4 check and continue playing your game. So that's another dodgy way of explaining how you can make use of a clear and sacrifice idea right in the opening stage, guys. A similar idea is the Bush-Gas gambit, where white starts with e4, you go e5. After knight to f3, instead of playing the typical Stafford gambit, you simply go bishop c5 right away, allowing white to take your pawn on e5 once again. Why sacrificing your pawn? Because you just want to open up some more lines after knight takes c6 and pawn takes c6, thus paving way for your light squared bishop again. And see, in the Lichess database, bishop c4 is the top played move, which is some kind of a positional mistake because that allows you to sacrifice your dark squared bishop on f2 once again, and after king takes, you simply go queen d4 check, first of all making white lose his right to castle, and on the next move you know you're going to win the bishop back thanks to the pawn we sacrificed on e5, which made it possible for us to reach this far. So that's another dubious example of a clear and sacrifice. Let's look at the last example of this. The last simple gambit that can explain a clear and sacrifice is the England gambit. As you might have noticed, I'm using these cheap tricks and gambits to explain the concept of a clear and sacrifice. So I'm not saying these are ideal situations. I want you to get the concept of what a clear and sacrifice is before I show you how grandmasters apply these ideas in the middle game and in the end game. So that's why we make use of these clear and sacrifices to stand out from the rest. So after e5, white normally takes, and then we go bishop c5 right away. The top played move by white is knight to f3 in this position, but here is where we play pawn to d6, especially in bullet, to try and trick our opponent in falling for the next trap. For example, after ed, I want you guys to imagine that this pawn is not here and that this file is open. So what we would love to do in that case is to take the pawn on f2 with check, knowing that white has to take the bishop on f2, after which we take the free queen on d1. So how do we clear the d file in order for our bishop f2 plan to work? Well, we simply bliss out knight e7. This is in bullet, by the way. And believe it or not, the top played move in the Lichess database is d takes e7, because most people don't know what they're doing. And now that we know our d file is open, this is when we go bishop takes f2 check, knowing the king can't come out due to this. And so king takes f2 is the only move, after which we now freely take the queen like that. So that's another dubious example that explains how a clear and sacrifice works. So we sacrifice material to pave way for another piece, or to simply open up some more lines. So now it is time for me to show you one or two middle game examples where grandmasters or other strong players applied these clear and sacrifices. So here is a random endgame position where black has to make a move in order to gain a decisive advantage or to win. What do you think is the best move for black in this position? Alright, so a strong player in this example would automatically see that if not for this knight, there was going to be a possibility to checkmate white on g2 after queen takes g2. So we first of all have to get rid of this knight, thus applying a clear and sacrifice idea, which means to move a piece off a line so another piece can move across it in a clearance combo. So the piece that moves away sacrifices itself. For example, I would play knight g3 check in this position so that now I can safely go queen takes g2 checkmate. Now wait a second. If I played knight takes f2 check, that was going to be a blunder because white would have taken back on f2 with his rook, and there was no way I was going to checkmate white on g2. So when it comes to clear and sacrifice, again, you need to be patient and analyze the moves very well, ensuring that you are about to make a correct clear and sacrifice. Otherwise, things may hit back. Now, if I flip this board with the same position, and now we say it is white to play, what would you play here as white in order to gain an advantage or probably win the game? Let me give you a hint. Once again, there's a clear and sacrifice here that white can make in order to gain back an advantage or to win. Let's go. So once again, white in this position has a very nice move. It is not knight takes e5. You guys must be listening. You need to be very patient when it comes to making such decisions. Every strong player in this position would see the move knight to f4. So sacrificing a knight with check, by the way, that came as a double check, so black was forced to take that knight. After which, white went on to play bishop c4, a killer move, pinning the queen to the king. And now, even if black plays knight g3 check, there is no queen takes g2 checkmate. I mean, the queen is pinned to the king, so technically speaking, the game is over right here. And this is a good example of a clear and sacrifice. It all comes from the simple opening examples that I was showing you in those dubious gambits. That's where we steal the ideas from. So that's the major difference between you who is watching out there and other strong players or titled players out there. You can play the opening stage very well, even more than a titled player, and you can also play your middle game very well, but these guys are very good when it comes to applying these principles, especially in the end game. So a grandmaster sees many clear and sacrifices on the board. When they reach the middle game or when they reach the end game, they'll start thinking of all these clear and sacrifices, positional sacrifices, etc., just to divide your attention. Hey you guys, thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned one or two things. If you found this video to be interesting, remember to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you are new. For more wonderful lessons, you can simply head to my website www.kasperchess.com and check out my courses there. Also, thank you so much for your support. Until next time, bye bye.